All right. We are now, let me think, the eighth webinar in our series. And it is a topic that many of you have requested. It is a topic that I am totally ignorant, inexperienced, and unlucky on, fishing from a sailboat while on passage. Luckily, via Helena and Steve from Noforeignland, we found Tony, who is much more experienced and is willing to share his experience with the group, being a very experienced fisherman. Before we start in the logistics, as usual, please keep your audio and your video muted. As usual, put your questions as they pop up in your mind during the webinar. Put them in the chat box. We will start first with about an hour of presentation by Tony. And then we will follow with more or less half an hour of questions. We have a number of questions which we have captured from the chat on WhatsApp this week. But feel free to put anything in, and during the Q&A session, after the presentation part, you can even unmute and ask follow-up questions. The more questions, the better. And for us organizing these webinars, an interactive audience is always what makes it interesting for us. As usual, the webinar will be recorded, and we'll publish the recording link in our WhatsApp chat group. With this, I am going on mute. Tony, the group is all yours. Welcome again, and thanks for joining us, Tony.
Yeah, and thank you for inviting me to talk. So yeah, right, let's get into it. Fishing from a sailboat. We've already got a technical issue here. There we go. No. Can you see that, Peter? I might need your.
I have still your front screen. I don't see you scrolling to the next slide.
Okay, it's everything was good before, and now it's not. Hang on, sorry, we've got a.
No worries, no worries. Take your
I don't
time.
know if it's my. Yep, sorry guys. Right, here we go. It looks like we.
Yeah. You're on.
Rightio. Hang on.
Okay, I'm going back on mute, Tony.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
No.
We're in the middle of nowhere, so it's internet can be a little bit shady here. Right, so my name's Tony Orton. I come from a little bit of a different background to most sailors. I've been I guess a professional fisherman or sports fisherman, running big game boats all over the world, and my family we've moved into this. We've bought a sailing catamaran, and we're currently doing a circumnavigation. And I guess our reason for this is to be able to sail to these remote fishing spots that we can't get to on a sports fishing boat, and have a bit of fun as a family and catch a few fish. So we're currently in Central America on the West Coast. We're in Costa Rica. We're going to be moving to El Salvador after this webinar, so it's quite exciting for us. I've got 23 years experience as a fishing guide, captain, and over 200,000 sea miles. So we've done a few miles chasing fish all over the world, in both the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans. I'm a sponsored fisherman, do a lot of product testing, development, and very passionate about the ocean and having my family along with us to experience all this. I guess, like, for the transition from a sports fishing boat to a sailing boat, I thought would be quite easy. Just jump on and put a few lines in the water and off we go. But it's actually been a real challenge, and we've learned a lot from it. So I guess this is what this talks about. We can probably share some of that with everyone, coming from a professional sports fishing background and now going to a sailboat. Bear in mind, a lot of the fishing we do is for fun, and we obviously catch a few fish along the way to eat. So we do approach it a little bit differently. So what we're going to talk about today, obviously the type of fish that we're going to be targeting or trying to catch. I think the hand line versus rod and reel is a really good topic to touch on. If you are going to buy a rod and reel, the choice, talk about line capacity, line type, leaders. There's a lot of how to rig these reels up. I think most people overlook the importance of setting a drag on a reel, and that's, especially on a sailboat, is critical. We'll go through that. Lure selection, placement of lures. We're going to talk about rigging trolling lures, how to rig them, and then fighting a fish from a sailboat, plan, preparation, safety, and then last but not least, the caring for your catch, which is the most important thing if you're going to eat it, and showing respect to a fish. So anyway, we'll just start moving through it. What we hope to catch, obviously we're trying to catch something that's eatable. When you're on passage, there's hard to beat the enjoyment of bringing a fresh yellowfin tuna or a mahi-mahi on deck and being able to eat that for the next few days. And it's part of being at sea, and it's something that we look forward to, and it's also something that can break up the monotony or the boredom of a long passage. So, and a lot of people find fishing a good pastime to do while they're on passage. So while we're offshore, we're predominantly targeting pelagic species of fish. So these are fish that are, living out in the open ocean. That they're traveling with, chasing bait or water currents and temperature. So some of the fish that we will be looking at are obviously mahi-mahi, also known as dorado or dolphin fish. A range of tuna species: bluefin, yellowfin, big eye and bonito, or skipjack tuna. Wahoo. In the passage down, from the northern Atlantic down through to the Caribbean, there's going to be a range of billfish, sailfish, blue marlin, white marlin. And then, of course, getting near land, you're going to be, there's a couple of different mackerel species as well. There's other species of fish, but these are predominantly what you're going to see and hopefully catch. So we'll just start working through each species. Mahi-mahi as a family, it's probably one of our favorite fish to catch and eat. Very versatile eating fish, freezes well. And you can fry it, deep fry it, use it in curries. There's a range of different things how you can cook it. But I guess the best thing for us is it freezes really well. So it's a great fish to be able to store. It's a fast growing fish. It can reach 1 meter long in its first year and a half of life. So they don't have a long life expectancy, and they have a very big appetite, so they can be quite an easy fish to catch. Found in warmer waters, so you're going to see them in probably the further south you go on this passage, or your route down to the Caribbean. A lot of the time we're catching them on current lines. You can get temperature change in the water. You can see current lines quite easily, but by the water moving. A lot of floating objects like log and weed lines. And quite often when we're on passage, and if we see a log in the distance or something floating, we'll always change course to go near that, troll some lures past it, and hopefully hook up. And a lot of the time, these floating objects out at sea will be attracting fish like mahi-mahi, because all the bait fish live around those objects, and the bigger predatory fish will be very close by, because that's going to be a food source for them. If we're trolling lures, we normally run smaller lures. We'll go over this during our talk. It just gets a better hookup rate, and it's a little bit more of a sort of, what's the word for it? It's an easy meal for a fish if it's a smaller lure. Bigger lures, it's for smaller fish like mahi-mahi can be a bit difficult. What's another species? A tuna species. You're going to see in a passage through from the northern Atlantic down to the Caribbean area, there's a lot of different temperature change. So you've got your bluefin, yellowfin, big eye, and bonito. In the cooler waters, probably northern area, you still got bluefin up there. You may get big eye, and you're definitely going to be see bonito or skipjack tuna. When the further south you go, you're going to be into a yellowfin and lots of skipjack or bonito, which are the smaller species. The lures that we're running, they can run a range of different lures for them. Small surface lures, which we'll talk about later on. Diving lures are really great for tuna, as long as you've got them a long way out the back of the boat. So if you are specifically targeting tuna and getting those lures out the back, they're great eating fish. But the most important thing with a tuna is to be able to kill it, bleed it, and get it cooled down as quick as possible, which can be a challenge on a sailboat, and we'll talk about that during this talk. Oops, we're just waiting for the next slide to come up here. Here we go. Wahoo. This is also a family favorite for us. A fantastic eating fish. It's got a firmer flesh. Amazing, if you're barbecuing it and curries. It's a very versatile fish like mahi-mahi, and it freezes really well if it's cared for during that process. It's a fast fish. It's got sharp teeth, as you can see on the picture here, and they're pretty hard on lures and pretty hard on the leaders that attach to the lures. So a lot of the time we'd recommend, if you are in an area where there are wahoo, we'd recommend putting on a wire leader. Otherwise, could lose an expensive lure. They're mainly found near underwater structure, like steep drop-offs, seamounts, and in more sort of tropical waters. So yeah, the teeth can be an issue, and we've lost many a lure to them, especially if we're out targeting a different species and don't have the wire. The billfish. Now, 3 main species. There is spearfish in the Atlantic, but not so prolific as the 3 species that we're talking about: the sailfish, white marlin, and a blue marlin. There is another species, a subspecies of the white marlin, but in essence, it's a white marlin. Looks like a white marlin. It's a warmer water fish. So the further south you go, you'll come into these species. They're targeting areas, especially if you're running down the coast and you're on a ledge or a drop off from 100 that could drop off to 500 to 1,000 or 1,500 meters. That's going to be a good area where these billfish will be feeding and traveling. There's a massive size variation in them, and there's some distinctive features. A sailfish, pretty much, which is the top picture up here, they have quite a large sail for their dorsal fin. They're a smaller fish out of the species, 20 to 40 kilos. They're actually okay to eat. We've eaten a few in the past, and if you're certainly looking at putting some fresh fish in the freezer, I wouldn't be, they're good. They're a good fish to eat, so I wouldn't be worried about that. When you're starting to get into your white marlin and blue marlin, they are starting to get big, 20 to 45 kilos for a white marlin. They are okay to eat. But it's a hell of a lot of meat to handle and to freeze on a sailboat. So, I mean, it comes down to personal choice. Blue marlin, they are an absolute handful. Very big fish, very powerful fish, and it's probably more of a bycatch for most sailboats, and it's probably also something that would break a lure, break a line, a hand line, and there is it's a challenging fish to even get near a sailboat. For the surface lures that we mainly use, smaller lures for sailfish and white marlin, they're very picky eaters, so they'll come in and they'll just keep whacking the lure. So a big lure, it's very hard to get a hook up on that. Whereas a small lure, they'll lunge at it and come and do a sideways bite and actually and get, you'll better get a hook up on that. Where blue marlin is very aggressive and will crash bite, and so a bigger lure is a better offering for that. So we're sort of trying to match our lure size to the fish that we're catching. Last but not least is the mackerel. You're probably going to see 2 species on the trip down. King mackerel, they can grow up to over 1.5 meters long, so they're quite a big fish. The Spanish mackerel is smaller. up to about 90 centimeters. On the Pacific side, we actually catch the Sierra mackerel, which looks very similar. They're found in shallow waters near land, seamounts, drop-offs, that, you're starting to get into that sort of 150 meters and shallower, up to 30 meters. So it is something that you will probably see getting closer to land. Same thing with the wahoo, very sharp teeth, you can see down here, and they're pretty hard on lures, and wire trace is also recommended. They'll pretty much hit anything. They're very aggressive fish. I would recommend with the mackerel, both the Spanish and the king mackerel, especially the king mackerel, very high in mercury. So if it might be all right for 1 or 2 meals, but it's not the sort of fish you'd want to be eating 3 or 4 times a week for weeks on end for the mercury levels. So let's get into the actual catching of these fish. This is a big debate amongst a lot of sailors, hand line versus rod and reel, and there's so many pros and cons of both. And from me, I come from a sports fishing background, so hand line is something that is really quite new to me. We do use them on sports fishing boats for catching bait, little skipjack tuna and that. But the more I get into this lifestyle, I can really see the benefits of hand lines, which we'll talk about. And then obviously there's a lot more benefits there for rod and reel. So we'll hang on, there we go. So like I say, hand line is a new thing for me, but the more I learn about it, the more it interests me, and I can see a lot of benefits. It's a very affordable and cost-effective option for sailors. I think it's a really good option for sailboats that have got sailing short-handed, a smaller crew. And Peter and I talked about this the other day, is like when you're doing, these watch schedules and that, and you're sleeping, you don't want to be waking up everyone, or, everyone needs their sleep. So a hand line is a great option to be able to, you can pull the fish in by yourself, get it onto the deck. Whereas a rod and reel, you might need someone to actually grab the line or grab the leader and gaff the fish. So a hand line I think is a good option for short-handed crew. You can make your own, very simple to make. It's very easy to store. It's light, minimal maintenance. There's not a lot of moving parts to it. It's a fantastic option for smaller fish, like smaller mahi-mahi, small tuna, wahoo, etc. And the reason, like if you've got a bigger fish, you need a drag system so you can peel line off, because you'll end up snapping your line with a hand line on a big fish like a blue marlin. So it does have its limits there. But because it's pretty much a straight line to the fish, and with the sailboat, sometimes you just have to plane the fish up onto the surface, and then it can skip along the surface while you're pulling it in. So a hand line is a perfect option for that. It doesn't have a drag or drag system, and it obviously doesn't have line capacity. It's just a fixed length. So a lot of these hand lines, when you're rigging them up, you'll see on this, it's got a rubber band down here. So that clip will get clipped to a cleat or some sort of fixing point on the vessel. And that rubber band can actually be also clipped onto there. So when you get a fish bite, that rubber band actually breaks and pulls away, and then the bungee will, stretch and compress to absorb a bit of the jerking from the fish. What we've seen in the past, and I think is a good idea, is when you have a breakaway, you need some sort of an alarm, because on a conventional rod and reel, you have a ratchet which goes off and everyone can hear it, wakes everyone up, gets all the energy levels going, I guess. But you don't have that on a hand line. So if you weren't watching, you could be dragging a fish for a very long time, or end up breaking some gear. So what I've seen is, to alarm the bite, is some people actually tie a small line to the rubber band or to this area, and just have a small line going back into the cockpit, and even just have like a bell or something that rattles. So when you do get a bite, it clips off, you can actually hear it. So just an idea, but and I have seen that before on other sailors. I've been doing a bit of research on hand lines, and I stumbled upon a really good YouTube channel, and he's got one video in there that actually shows you how to make a hand line, and I thought it was a really valuable resource, and my son and I are actually going to go and build one now because of watching it, and it's there for you to have a look at. So I'm sure when this video this goes up, the resource will be there to go and have a look at it. So it goes into great detail, and they look really good quality, and it looks like a fun thing to make, and quite affordable. So there's all, I guess, the advantages, disadvantages of hand lines, and we'll talk a little bit further about this during this talk. So now a rod and reel option is a fantastic option. It does have a lot of benefits, and there's certainly some disadvantages of it. The drag system is great. You can adjust the drag, so it starts making things a lot more accurate when you're fishing. You know how much drag you have when you're trolling certain lures. You know, you might have a heavy drag for big lures and big hooks, or a lighter drag for smaller lures and small hooks. So you can get that out of the reel. And I think that's really critical if you're fighting larger fish, or you accidentally hook something that's very big. Having a drag system will enable you to not lose all your line, or be able to control what's going on. You've got a ratchet system. We talked about that before with the hand line. With a ratchet system on a reel, it's like a little clicker that goes off once line starts peeling off. So you can be, you know, it gives you the alarm, I guess, if you get a bite, or if you hook up to a piece of weed or some debris in the water that pulls the line off. Line capacity. Obviously, a conventional reel is going to have a very large line capacity, and we'll talk about this in a minute. How much we should have. It's easy to adjust a lure. With a hand line, it's just at a fixed length most of the time, whereas with a rod and reel, you can wind that lure in to suit the speed that you're going to, where on the wave you want the lure to be running, and to get the best out of it. So we'll talk a bit about that later on as well. It's obviously a lot more expensive than a hand line. And it requires maintenance, and we'll talk about the different options of the rod and reels soon. And also, if you're going to be fighting the fish, you're more than likely going to be needing a gimbal belt and a harness to be able to fight the fish from the vessel, and also be able to put the amount of load on it that you need to get a fish in. So rod and reel choice. If you're going to buy a reel, I think it's a very harsh life that it's going to have. It's going to be on the back of a sailing yacht for days on end. It's going to get salt water all over it, and it's, you know, you really need a good quality game reel with large line capacity, preferably an aluminium body, and a quality drag system. The reel really needs to have a lever drag system, I think, to be able to control how much drag you're putting on the reel. I've seen people use reels with a level wind, and I don't know if everyone's familiar what a level wind is. It's like a little mechanism that actually makes the line spread out evenly on the reel, so it goes from side to side when you wind the handle. Great for inshore fishing, great for smaller fish. But once you're trolling offshore, and even a mahi-mahi or a small tuna, with the amount of line that will peel off that reel when you hook up, that level wind can get stuck, and it will just end up snapping the line. So it's not advisable for an offshore reel. Rod choice. I would strongly recommend that if you are going to buy a rod, that you want it set up for 80-pound line. Anything less than that is not going to give you the options. And the last thing you want to do is peel off 500 meters of line, and then the line parts because it's not strong enough. And what will end up happening is that fish will just swim around with the line in its mouth and end up dying, and no one wins from that situation. So I don't know if you can see the picture there with that's my son fighting a fish, but the rod, on the rod choice, you can get either a bent butt, which the bottom part of the rod is bent, or a straight butt, and that really comes down to personal choice. It all comes down also to the setup of your vessel. The bent butt I think is great for fighting the fish. It's especially on a sailing yacht, you know, you can, if you've got a straight butt, the rod's more vertical, whereas a bent butt, it's on more of an angle, so the line can get out and get over to the side of the vessel a lot more. So I think a bent butt is a good option. We're not as maneuverable as these big fancy sports fishing boats with, you know, 2,000 or 4,000 horsepower engines, and very maneuverable. So trying to get that line off to the side of the vessel is good. So a bent butt does do that. Straight butt, obviously, when you're trolling, the tip of the rod's higher, so you can, it might work a lure a little bit better. So yeah, it just comes down to personal choice and you know, working out what you want, I guess. But I'd be sort of, most of the time I'd be leaning towards the bent butt. Plus the other thing is if the rod's on a little bit more of an angle and you do hook up and someone's put the drag pressure up too much, you run less chance of snapping the rod. So your bent butt's got a lot of positives there. Also with rod choice, we're looking here at the guides on the rod. You can get either rollers, which are like little ball bearings with rollers that the line can slide across, or in this case, guides. The guides are less expensive. They are, with modern technology, they've got silicon carbide in the guides. They can disperse heat very well. So the days of needing rollers have almost gone. So if you're trying to find something that you want less maintenance, less that can go wrong, I personally think finding a rod with as many guides on it as possible is a good option. It's just one less thing to maintain, and like we you know, I said before, the rod could be sitting out in the elements for 2 or 3 weeks, so there's going to be a lot of salt build up in that as well, which is not good on any moving parts. So that's another personal option, but it's good to talk about the, you know, the pros and cons of it. The rollers are certainly nice when you're fighting the fish. The line seems to transmit over the rollers very nicely, providing they've been maintained and that they're moving freely. If they're not, then there's going to be a few problems there. We get a lot of messages from a lot of different people fishing, especially doing, you know, at the moment we're in the Pacific, and we've had a few people going, I've lost all my line again, I've been spooled, I've broken line, and it takes a while to get for these people to understand how the drag system works on a reel, because it's something, I mean, I was never taught this when I was first started fishing, and it's not the sort of thing that most people tell you in a shop when you go and buy a reel. So the first thing we'll talk about is, you know, why is line capacity, you know, how much line you can actually physically get on this reel, so important to us. For a sailboat, it's very difficult to slow down. You know, if you've got sails out, you're sailing downwind and you hook a fish and it's a big fish, and all of a sudden line's peeling off the line. If you don't have a lot of capacity, or a lot, you know, a lot of capacity on that reel, it's going to get pretty tense pretty quick, and there's a good chance that the line will just break once it gets to the end of the spool, and that'll be that. So I would be looking at a reel that can hold anything from 700 meters to 1,000 meters of line, which sounds like a lot, but that is pretty much the standard big game reel, and depending on the line weight. With modern technology now, you can actually get smaller reels that will still hold a large capacity, providing you use a braid backing. So there's a few different lines out there that you can use now for fishing. The first one, which is a traditional line, which is monofilament, it's you know, either clear or it's got a color. It's a traditional fishing lines. It's quite stretchy. It breaks down in the sun after a period of time, and it knots up well. There's a lot of benefits from it, but the problem if you spool your entire reel with monofilament is if you get some sort of damage, you know, 50 meters down or 100 meters down, you need to replace the whole lot. You can't knot it or retie it. But if you go for have a backing, then you can have a different type of material for the backing, and then tie a short monofilament line on, and then just replace a short piece of monofilament. You need to have monofilament or mono fishing line in the length of line, because it is stretchy. It does provide a lot of shock absorption, and if it was just straight braid, which has zero stretch, like your Dynemas or your Spectras or your specific fishing lines, it's just straight to the fish. So you're going to end up breaking hooks. The hook will just get pulled out. So you do need to have a certain amount of monofilament. When we're using a lot smaller reels, like I said before, but with the ability now to use braid, because braid is a lot thinner. So if you've got 80-pound monofilament, and then and also 80-pound braid, the 80-pound braid is going to be probably at least quarter of the thickness or the diameter of the monofilament. So with these new modern reels, they're specifically designed to be able to put a braid backing on, and then a monofilament top shot on top of that. It's, being able to have that short monofilament, it's easy to replace that top part of the line. And the braid backing will last anything from 5 to 7 years, a lot longer than monofilament will ever last. So in the end, it actually works out. It's quite expensive to put the braid on initially, but once it's on, it's going to last for a very, very long time, and you only have to replace a short amount of monofilament once it gets worn or sunlight damage. So, and it also, you don't have to store big spools of line on the vessel as well if you do get spooled or if you damage that line. So I think it's a great option, and it's something that needs to be looked at, certainly when you're purchasing a rod and reel. But very important to have between 700 and 1,000 meters of line on the reel. I think 80-pound is a good general purpose line weight for your monofilament top shot or your mono line. Anything less than that, it can, the abrasion on it will shorten the life of it quite dramatically. Whereas 80-pound, you've got a little bit of forgiveness there because it's a little bit thicker. And if you're using a backing, the braid backing, 100-pound hollow braid seems to be the good combination to go with the 80-pound mono top shot. Once we've got the backing on and our monofilament top shot on, we then need to attach a leader to this, and the leader is, I guess, at the business end or the lower end of the system, I guess, and it's a lot thicker line. Normally a leader for game fishing or trying to catch mahi-mahi, tuna, is going to be between 7 and 9 meters long, which is quite long. And we break that leader up into two parts generally. I mean, we have a certain, on this reel you can see here, we've actually wound the leader onto the reel, and it's called a wind-on leader. And this is a fantastic option for sailboats, because it means that you can then wind on most of the leader and get the fish a lot closer to the vessel. In a lot of traditional game fishing, we might just have a very big long leader because you've got a lot of crew on the boat. You can manhandle it in, whereas it doesn't work like that on a sailboat. And we've found the wind-on leader is a great option. You can buy wind-on leaders at most good tackle stores. That wind-on leader would need to be anything from 5 to 6 meters long. It's going to have a snap swivel on the end of it that you can attach your lure, and on the other end where you attach it to the to your fishing line is going to be a loop-to-loop connection, and there's a few knots that you can learn in there, and a lot of these connections that you can easily be googled to see how to do it. We don't have time to go into all the knots, I don't think, but so yeah, certainly a wind-on leader, and then from there it's going to be your short bite leader to your lure, which normally is around about 3 to 4 meters long. Since we've been fishing and living on a sailboat, we've made our bite leaders, we call it, which is the small leader from the snap swivel to the lure a little bit longer than we would in a game boat, just because of the fact that we're a lot higher up. You know, with our decks are a lot higher than a game fishing vessel, so you want to be able to wind that snap swivel right pretty much to the tip, and then still have a little bit of line left that you can get a couple of wraps around the line to be able to pull that fish safely to the side of the boat to gaff it or to pull it on. So yeah, hopefully that's not confusing everyone, but there's a little bit to learn about, you know, how to set up your reel and take the time. But certainly backing, mono top shot, wind on leader, and then your bite leader. And we'll talk about more about the bite leaders as we go on here. The drag system on a reel, and this is a really good thing to understand about the drag system on a reel. With a lever drag, this is a lever drag reel, and this is predominantly what most offshore game fishing reels or trolling reels will have. The idea of the lever is you can put it up and down, and it drags, it puts pressure on the side plates or the drag plates in the reel and adjusts the pressure on the spool, so you can control how much drag pressure you have on the line. It should be preset well before you even put a line or a lure in the water. It's there for a reason, and it's to obviously stop the line breaking. That's pretty much the main reason for it. Further up on the side of the reel, you'll see it will say strike, and that's where you're going to have it, where you're predominantly going to be fighting a fish. You may have it set less than that when you're trolling the lure, just to have the right tension, but depending on how big your hooks are or what sort of lure you're trolling. It's important to have the right drag, and it's important to understand it. As line, if you hook up on a fish and the line starts peeling off the reel, the spool diameter gets smaller and smaller and smaller as the line goes off. And what happens when that line starts peeling off and the smaller the diameter is, in actual fact, the drag pressure is starting to increase. I hope that makes sense. But as the more line that comes off, the more the tension on the spool increases, and you get more and more drag pressure applying naturally. So if you get a really big fish on, sometimes you actually need to let the drag off, because your drag pressure is increasing as that spool gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So when we set the drag pressure on a reel, we normally set it to either 1/4 or 1/3 of the line weight. So if you're fishing with 37 kg line or 80-pound line, then the drag's going to be preset to approximately 12 to 13 kilos. And otherwise, when you're losing line and that spool's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, you're going to get more and more drag, and eventually that line will just part and break because it's got too much pressure on it. How to preset the drag, and this is one thing, like when you go to a fishing store and buy a new reel, they probably don't even teach you or tell you how to do this, but it's a pretty simple process. You've got the lever here, you pull the lever right down to free spool, and you've got this drag cam or on the preset knob on the side. You can either adjust it up or adjust it back to either increase or decrease the pressure. You then put the drag back up to strike and pull some line off the reel. If you've got a set of scales, you can pull it off and see exactly how much line pressure that is on the reel. If it's not enough, pull this back to free spool, turn it up a couple more clicks, and then test it again. And eventually you'll be able to feel, just by pulling the line off the reel, if it feels like it's in the right place. It doesn't have to be exactly 100% on 12 kilos, but as long as it's within one or 2 kilos of that is good. But that's how you do it, and it's important to do that before you start. There's if you've got too much drag pressure, we've already talked about this, eventually the line will break, and if you don't have enough drag pressure, the line's going to peel off too quickly, too easily, and you could get spooled. So it's probably the number one thing, and it's the number one issue that we see with people, especially in sailboats, because you can't slow the vessel down quickly, is that they lose a lot of line very quickly, and then the line breaks, or not enough drag pressure and you get spooled. So hopefully that touches on that. We can talk about this a bit more in the Q&As at the end. Another rod and reel combo that a lot of boats are now putting on is a topwater setup. And this is something that you really wouldn't troll with. It's more of a big spinning reel that you can, you'll be able to cast at feeding fish on the surface. And especially when you start getting down to more warmer waters and you might see some debris in the water, a big tree, or in this case, we've just got birds, dolphins, and tuna feeding. Sometimes just being able to, get the boat near that and actually cast a lure into that feeding area will result in a hookup. And a lot of the feeding fish a lot of the good eating fish that we actually catch, we catch them with topwater gear. It's also a great rod and reel to have on the boat once you get to location, or if you're going in between islands and you see seamounts or areas, even going out in your tender and going fishing. So I think it's a good option to have ready to go. It's, you want a reel that's probably going to hold about 300 meters of line, 50 to 80 pound braid. These topwater rods are between 8.5 feet long, and they're made for, being able to cast a long distance. You don't need a long leader. It's just 1.5 meters long, 120 pound for the leader. And there's a few knots to be able to connect the leader and the braid, which is a PR knot, which would be probably the preferable one. And obviously you're going to need a little selection of lures to go with that. But I think it's a good option to have on the boat if you've got room, and if you're getting into your fishing, just gives you a few options, especially when you get to some of these locations, or you're jumping around islands and more sort of coastal fishing. Lure choices, my God, this is something that is can be pretty daunting, but I think with what we've been doing over the last few years, we've sort of narrowed it down a little bit. And if you're only going to buy a handful of lures, then I think we might hopefully better touch on that now and solve that mystery, I guess. The problem that we have on a sailboat is, and I guess I've come from a sports fishing background, I keep talking about that, but everything's very, what's the word for it? Structured. The boat has been designed to be able to troll at a certain speed in pretty much every sort of sea state, and everything's set up within half a knot, so we know exactly how everything swims and where it swims. Whereas on a sailboat, our speed, it changes by the second. We could be doing 5 knots, we could be doing 8 knots, and back to 4 knots within a few minutes. And to try and get a lure to swim correctly in that is challenging. And I think a lot of these lures that we see in the stores are certainly designed to swim at a certain speed and a certain sea condition, and it does limit our options and what we're going to use. The other thing when picking lures, or what are we going to be targeting? Obviously, we're trying to target something that we can eat. So maybe a big marlin lure might not be the best option for most sailboats, because are you wanting to catch a marlin? Sure, it's a hell of a lot of fun and it's an achievement in itself, but is it going to put food on the table? Probably not. That would be a daunting thing to be doing, is pulling a 200-kilo blue marlin on the boat. With a lot of these choices, we've got surface lures, which is obviously this sort of style lure with the skirts. They then come with different angled faces, cup faces, bullet heads. So there's a few different choices there. We can talk about this as we go on. Cedar plugs, which is that little wooden lure there, quite possibly one of the best lures, I think, for a sailboat. Diving lures, which is that bib face lure. There's a few different other types. We'll talk about that. Teasers, I think this is a really good option for a sailboat. We'll talk about this soon. And then obviously the topwater lures. So there's a massive selection. Obviously we're limited for space on sailboats, and we are all limited with budget as well. So it pays to be able to pick the right ones. Let's, I guess, start with surface lures. I've got a bit of a combination up here. Starting at the top, that's a marlin lure, I guess we'll call that. And they get smaller and smaller and smaller. If we're, specifically going out there trying to target eatable fish, yellowfin tuna, mahi-mahi, wahoo, the smaller lures are probably going to be a better option. If you want to catch a marlin, then maybe some of these bigger lures. That lure at the top, it's got a more of a flat face. It's actually got a cup face, so it makes a large pop in the water when it's moving through. We've got your angled face lures, which swim really well in calmer conditions. And then when we get down to these two, this little lure here has a flat face, and then we have a bullet head. Now, these are really good options for us because they swim well in a varied conditions. You know, like these top 3 lures with angled faces, or the bigger lure, they're hard to swim in a lot of, you know, different speeds or different sea conditions, whereas these bottom 2 lures are probably going to be a better option for us on a sailboat. The lure here that I'm pointing to, the sort of the greeny color, it's got a flat face, so it's going to work better at slower speeds, where you can get the lure to get a little bit of action, to get a little bit of, you know, making a bit of a smoke trail through the water, popping. When the speed picks up, a bullet lure might be a better option. A lot of this lure at the bottom has been a fantastic option for us in a sailboat. It works well in a lot of different sea conditions. It's affordable, it's cheaper, and yeah, it seems to be a good option, especially if the speed picks up. It still keeps swimming, whereas some of these larger lures end up just going to skip out on the surface. To rig these lures, we're using a bite leader like we talked about before, between sort of 2 and 4 meters long. We're using anything from 200 to 300 pound leader. It's going to have a little eye crimped on one end that you can hook to your snap swivel. And then at the other end, we're crimping to our hook. And there's a lot of different ways of crimping to the hook. We prefer a single hook. You can buy a lot of lures, or a lot of people rig lures with 2 hooks. They face them different ways to get the lure to swim, or they think it's got a better hookup rate. In actual fact, it doesn't. The single hook has just the same hookup rate as 2 double hooks, or 2 hooks in the way you rig it. So a single hook is a great option. It's a lot safer, which I think is very important on a sailboat, especially if you're doing long offshore passages. We always say that if a lure's got 2 hooks in it, it's 1 hook for the fish and 1 hook for the angler. So I think that might be the best option for a sailboat for sure. You need to be able to crimp it, so it's good to have a crimper on the boat. It doesn't need to be very big. You can buy these tackle stores and a selection of crimps depending on the thickness of your line. It's quite hard to see, but if you look closely, there's a little bit of chafing tube in that around the line where it actually goes through the hook, and a little bit of shrink tube over it as well to stop that hook folding around and moving and tangling on itself. And it also makes it a little bit rigid. You can get a better hookup rate with it, sort of a semi-stiff sort of rig, we call it. So just a little bit of shrink tube in between the mono and onto the hook, stops it moving around as much. When we're running these type of lures, the surface lures, it pays to spend a little bit of time looking at it as it's swimming. We like to run the lure on the front face of the wave, but at the lower sort of quarter or lower third of the wave. If you have it high up on the wave, it's going to skip around a lot more. It's actually a lot less visible for a fish. Whereas if it's lower down on the face of the wave, it's a lot more visual for the fish. You get a better hookup rate. The fish can actually bite it a lot easier, and it's going to swim a lot better as well. These lures are designed to go under the surface for a little bit. They have air trapped in them, so they make sort of a smoking trail, then they pop up. They get more air on them and go through, so that you can get that movement going a lot better if it's just on the face of the wave. So if you've got any questions on this, we can certainly talk about this at the end of the talk. Cedar plugs. I think this is one of the best lures you could have on a sailboat. It is super affordable for a start. Doesn't matter if you lose 1 or 2, but they swim really, really well. You can have them a lot further out the back of the vessel. They swim under the surface, so you don't have to be so conscious about trying to get it on the face of the wave swimming properly, which is good on a sailboat because the speed varies so much. You could be surfing down waves and then slow, and and the lures, a surface lure, we swing all over the place, whereas a cedar plug will just keep swimming. They just have that nice little weaving motion. And wahoo, yellowfin tuna or tuna, and mahi-mahi, they love them, and they're a great option. They come in all different colors, but the good old traditional raw cedar with the lead head on it seems to be a bit of a winner, and I personally wouldn't buy anything else. When we rig these, we rig them with a different type of leader. Most leader, it's soft, it's called the monofilament, like your fishing line. It's just a bigger, thicker version of that. You can actually buy a line, and it's called fluorocarbon. It's a little bit more expensive. It's a lot more rigid, so you need to crimp it. But the benefits of it is it's a lot higher in abrasion resistant, and it's a lot less visible in the water. So if you've got any lures that are under the surface, the fluorocarbon seems to be a better option. And going back to the abrasion resistant, because it's a lot more abrasion resistant, you can actually then drop down a size, whereas in monofilament, we might be using a 300-pound leader, whereas we can use 200-pound fluorocarbon, and it's a lot less visible in the water. And I think it's a really great option to have this on these surface, or these lures that are sort of slightly subsurface. I don't know if you can see on the middle lure there, it's got a the hook is hanging out. The hook actually slides in and out of the lure, which is great when you're fighting the fish. It means the lure can get away from the fish, and it just stops that line twisting around it and breaking. It pays to have a few spare hooks. They are a specific type of hook that goes in there. It doesn't have such a big eye on it. So if you are buying some of these cedar plugs, get a few hooks to go with it. They will go rusty after a while with being trolled for so long. We run these lures a little bit further back than a conventional surface lure, so it also makes it great for tuna that are a little bit wary, having it further back from the boat. So yeah, I think cedar plug's a really good option, and would be something that would be pretty advisable putting in the spread. Also, diving lures are also another great option, and especially if the boats, sailboats, a light day, you might only be doing 4 to 5 knots. A subsurface lure with these bib lures, especially, they dive down and they keep swimming well at 4 knots, whereas a surface lure or a cedar plug might not be swimming so well. So to have like a Rapala style lure or these Zozuri diving lures is a really good option. They're fantastic for tuna, wahoo, and mahi, all the eating species. And we rig these exactly the same way with a cedar plug, with the 200-pound fluorocarbon leader, 3 to 4 meters long. If you've got treble hook, like on these diving lures, the Rapala one down here, they can be a real issue, because obviously there's 2 of them and there's a few barbs there, so you need to take a lot of care when you're handling the fish, trying to keep the hooks away. I see a lot of people bringing fish onto the boat and just flicking them onto the deck, and the heads flapping around with a couple of treble hooks hanging out is not ideal. So please be very, very careful of that. Also, with a subsurface lure, it creates a lot of drag when you're trolling it, so you're going to need to make sure your rod holder is going to be able to handle that pressure. Also, if the wind picks up, you're going to have more drag, so you might not actually be able to wind it in. The drag pressure just gets that strong. So that needs to be taken into account. So maybe they're more set up for those lighter wind days, when you're sort of just cruising along, or when you're under engine and you're in the catamaran, you're trying to conserve fuel and just run with one engine and you're going at slower speeds. So subsurface lure is a great idea. I don't know if we can get this one to go. Here we go. So teasers or attractors, and I think this is a really good option that might be overlooked on sailboats a lot. We run them a lot on game boats. We could actually end up having 4 teasers out, and then only just a couple of lures with hooks in them. So a hookless teaser is a really good option. You can see here, we've got a teaser here and then a lure behind it, and the lure behind it's obviously got a hook in it. The teaser doesn't, and what it does, it puts a lot of commotion in the water, and most fish will always just take the lure that's behind it. That's the way it works, you know. So having a teaser is a really cost-effective way of having more gear in the water or more commotion in the water for a very small cost. And, you know, we can rig up these, you know, these are big, large lures. Probably not ideal, but you can rig up some inexpensive squids and then just have a cheap sort of cup face lure or lure behind it. That's all just like a big sort of chain of lures, and it just gets dragged behind the boat. And a lot of the time we can just run this with a rope and tie it off onto a cleat. Doesn't need a rod and reel. And then once we hook up, we can just pull it in by hand. So yeah, keeps it simple. Run it off a cleat, and it just adds a lot more presence in the water. So you can just run one lure, one rod and reel, and have a big teaser to add a bit more sort of commotion in the water. I guess with the lures, last but not least, obviously topwater lures. We talked about maybe possibly having that one casting rod. Great for surface feeding fish, fishing around reef edges, sea mounts. Poppers are really probably the most versatile surface lure you can buy. They've got a cup face on them. It's a really easy technique, just a sweeping motion of the rod to make that lure sort of chug through the water and make a popping motion. Lures from, you know, 150 to 220 millimeters long, so they're going to cover pretty much all the species, you know, in the Atlantic. The smaller lures are going to be better for mahi-mahi, and you know, obviously the bigger ones might be better for some of the bigger tuna species. So you only need a small short leader on your topwater rod, 1.5 meters long. And like I said before, just take care with these treble hooks. They can be dangerous. Crush the barbs. It's much easier to remove a barbless hook out of your skin than a barbed hook. So you can just crush them with a set of pliers to pull them back. We can talk more about this in the Q&A at the end. I guess if I had to have the ultimate setup for a sailboat, if I was going to, you know, be able to pick something out of a store, there's a few things I would probably have. A game rod and reel, I think, is a great option. We've talked about the benefits of it. There's the Tiagra 50 LRS, which is almost, it's a compact game reel with the drag capacity of an 80-pound reel. You can spool this with 1,000 meters of line, of hollow line, and then another 50 or 100 meters of an 80-pound top shot. So you can get a lot of line on this. These reels are bulletproof. I mean, they've been charter proven now for over 20 years. There's very little moving parts inside the reel. You could sit that thing out in the sun for the next 5 years and it's still going to be working. And I'd pair that up with an 80-pound bent butt rod, similar to this, what we've got in the picture here, with guide, so you don't have that issue with the rollers, you know, seizing up. Just trying to keep everything as simple, and then a fighting harness and belt to go with that. Now that I've spent more time sailing in the last 2 years, I can really see the benefit of a hand line. And you could either do either or you could have both combinations. I think the hand line is great for short-handed vessels, short-handed sailing. When everyone's resting, one person can deal with it. It's a simple option. I think it's a great option if the boat's moving at speed. I think, you know, with smaller lures, you can actually just drag the fish to the boat instead of trying to having to deal with a drag system on a rod and reel and line pulling off. Whereas a hand line, you can get that fish up onto the surface and then be able to just keep the momentum going and skip it all the way to the boat. So I think a hand line's certainly in there and part of that ultimate setup. Topwater casting rod, we talked about this before. I think it's a good option if you're really getting into your fishing and having that once you get near land. A selection of lures, especially cedar plugs. You know, you might a couple of smaller surface lures, little bullet heads or little chugger heads that are going to be great for mahi-mahi, wahoo, and tuna. And then your deep diving lures as well when the boat's going slow. So you could get away with 5 or 6 lures and pretty much have a good spread there for different conditions. And I would strongly recommend or think that squid chain or a teaser is a really good option. It's just adding so much more commotion and so much more presence to your lure that's out the back of it to be able to attract fish to the vessel, you know. So having a squid chain or a teaser tied off the cleat is a good idea as well. So that would be my recommendation if you're going to be setting the boat up. And you could take it or leave it, whether you have a rod and reel combo or a hand line. You could do one or the other or both. So yeah, it just comes down to the budget and how much extra stuff you want to have on your vessel. Fighting a fish from a sailboat. Like anything, I guess as sailors, we do a lot of preparation with our rig. You know, we assess the situation before we put sails up, and I think the same should happen before you put a line in the water. You know, like you're on passage, you might have new crew. It's a good plan to talk about, you know, what you're going to do if you hook up on a fish. You know, it's you know, people want to be resting, I think. So, you know, do you want to wake everyone up if you hook a fish, or you know, assess the conditions as well. Is it even worth putting a line in the water? Is it too windy? Are the boat moving too fast? You know, is it just one of those days where it's big swell, you know, uncomfortable? Do you want to be having to deal with a fish? Is it safe enough to deal with a fish? You know, part of that plan is, you know, do you drop the sails if you hook up on a fish or a decent sized fish? How are you going to do that quickly before you get spooled? You know, have you got a way of being able to slow the vessel down, you know, putting it up into the wind or dropping one sail? You know, there's a whole lot of things that need to be thought about before a line goes in the water. You know, having all your gear ready once the fish does get near the vessel, safety plan, and also, you know, how to secure a fish once you get it near the boat, or dispatch the fish, which we'll talk about soon. You know, we talked about this just before, you know, for smaller fish, you know, an eatable fish, you know, maybe the hand line is the best option. It's just, you know, everyone needs to look at their own vessel and work out what's best for them. There's no hard and fast rule. And it comes down to, you know, I think the safety is a really important thing. And then also how many people you've got on the vessel and how quick and easy is it to drop sails if you need to, if you're going to fight a larger fish. There will be people that are going on this route that will hook onto marlin. It's inevitable what's going to happen there. There's going to be people that hook into big tuna. There's going to be a lot of ground to cover, and people will be hooking some big fish. So it needs to be talked about, I think, before you start fishing. One thing that we've learned a lot, I guess, in a sailboat is, you know, especially in a catamaran, we've got our helm station on our vessels on one side. So when we first started doing this, was like we hook up on a marlin, and we would then turn the boat towards the fish, and the angler would have to walk up. If they've hooked it on the opposite side to the helm area, they'd have to walk all the way up to the front of the boat while we turned the boat around, and try and get that angler fighting it on the helm side. We've learned a different way now. We can actually get the rod around the back of the boat so we can fight it on the helm. So really important to be able to do that, so the skipper or captain can actually see the angler, can see the fish, and everything's a lot safer. You know, it's not so, you know, people aren't yelling all over the boat trying to work out what's going on. And also your vessel might turn better one way, especially if you're trying to turn it into the wind or into the waves. So that might be, you know, if you're on a monohull, one side of the boat, you might feel a lot more comfortable. The boat feels a lot more responsible, maneuverable on that side. So try to fight the fish from that side. And I guess the one thing we've learned over the years is when you're fighting a fish is you want to be able to fight the fish so the vessel is downwind of the fish. And I think that's a really critical thing, especially with these sail drives, you know, large rudders hanging off the bottom and keels. You don't want to be upwind of the fish and drift down over it, because then, as everyone knows, the line's going to go under the vessel and it's going to be a lot going on. So downwind of the fish, a lot of species, you don't need to drive to the fish. With tuna, even a large tuna, you can actually, you know, get the boat closer to the lines, a little bit more vertical, and then just stop the boat and sit downwind of it. Same with mahi-mahi, wahoo. and then just get that fish into circles. Once they get tired, they start swimming in circles, and you can just gradually get them closer to the boat. But if you're downwind of it, you are slowly pulling the fish towards you. You're not rolling over top of it. So I think that's a really good thing to be able to do, is just try and get the boat downwind of it, and then you've got a bit of breathing space. Having gear ready is also critical. It comes back to the preparation, having some gloves ready. You could just have a plastic container on the deck that's got gloves in it. You might have your gaff handy, a knife, something to be able to get the hooks out of the fish, a rope with a little loop on it that you can quickly put around the tail of the fish. We have a club on the boat, so we can dispatch the fish or put it out of its misery very quickly in a humane way. Have the gimbal belt ready, and actually, the person that's going to be fighting the fish, have it already fitted so it's ready for them to go. You're not sort of mucking around and trying to get that on the person while you're trying to get sails down or slow the boat down and all these other things going on. So having a good plan in place, I think, is critical to keep everyone safe and calm, especially 10 days into a passage. Everyone's starting to get a little bit tired and a bit frazzled. So just trying to keep everything as organized as possible, I think, is pretty critical. Once you've got the fish near the boat, obviously, it's now we want to bring it onto the vessel to be able to eat it, and trying to get that fish as quickly as possible to the vessel is I think is pretty critical. And I mean, you can only do what we can do, depending on the conditions. But the longer that fish is out there struggling, and resisting, I guess, putting a lot of energy into fight, it's building up lactic acid, and it can spoil the meat, and it's heating up as well. So the quicker we can get the vessel in, prevent it from stressing, we've got the meat's going to be a better quality. Obviously, trying to put a gaff in a fish, I mean, at the end of the day, you just want to get the fish, so a gaff shot's going to go where it goes. But if avoidable, try and get it into the back of the head or into the lower gut area, or somewhere where it's not going to go through the meat, which will and spoil the meat as such. So, but at the end of the day, you just got to get the fish to the boat. Avoid the fish bouncing around on the deck. That also is a great way of spoiling the meat. That's why we would have a little tail rope. So it might be a piece of rope that could be 1.5 meters long, that's got a nice little loop in the end, that once you get the fish, you can quickly wrap that line around, put it through the loop, put another 1/2 inch around the tail, and you can actually tie it off onto a cleat. It doesn't matter, it's not going to go anywhere. That line can't go up past the tail, providing it's tight. So it's a good way of doing it. And then once you've got that fish tied safe, you can then we normally, with most fish like wahoo, tuna, mahi-mahi, we'll club the fish. We'll give a good heavy wax between the eyes, and then we'll get a knife and bleed that fish as soon as we can, to get the blood out of the fish. Having a tail rope's a great thing. If like on a sail or on a sailing catamaran, you've got the sugar scoops at the back. If you can tie that fish off, you can then run the knife where you need to bleed it, and then be able to have the head in the water to flush the blood out of that fish as quick as possible. And there are a lot of different ways of bleeding a fish, and you can do a lot of research on it. But for me, the simplest way and the best way is to be able to open the gill plate and then run the knife around the soft membrane, which attaches all the gills to the fish. And there's a massive amount of blood that pumps through that area, and the heart is right in behind the back of that. I think it's the quickest and most humane doing it. With a tuna, you can sever in behind the back of the pec fins, and the blood will come out, and you can put a hose in it. But it's a complicated process, and I just think if you can run that knife around the back of the gills and that soft membrane, the blood gushes out. The heart almost can fall out after that, and it's a really humane way of putting the fish out of its, ending its life quickly and getting the blood out. It's really important to get the blood out. The blood is warmer than the flesh, and you want to get it out so it doesn't spoil. Blood goes off quicker than the flesh. It changes the color. The flesh can go a lot more translucent color once the blood is out of there, but it adds to the quality of the fish. You can you can have a bucket ready to put the head of the fish on it all over the deck, or a cooler bin, or like we just said before, hang it off the back of the boat, make sure it's secure, and bleed it out. I've been on boats before where I've seen people pour like vodka over the gills of the fish, and it kills it, but it's actually not getting the blood out of the fish. So the getting the blood out of the fish is the critical thing. Plus, it's also, in my eyes, a waste of good drink. So yeah, dispatching that fish as quick as you can by clubbing it and bleeding it is the best way. If you can put the fish on ice, that's unbelievable. A lot of us don't have that capacity on our boats. On a sports fishing boat, we have an ice machine running all day long, and when you get a big yellowfin tuna, you might cut all the gills out, cut and pull all the gut cavity out, and pack that fish with ice, and you can put it in a big slurry of ice. We can't do that. So I think, if you've got a cooler bin, and when you leave wherever you're going from, and you've got ice in there that you can use it, then that's great. Otherwise, you need to get the fillets off as soon as you possibly can, and then process them up, put them in a cooler or a fridge or a freezer to cool them down as quick as you can. So when we're filleting our fish, I can see on there, we try and keep everything as clean as possible. And so we're constantly lifting the fish off what we're filleting on, hosing it down, cleaning it. We have paper towels to be able to pat the fish down, get the blood off it. We never, ever, ever put water on the fish fillet. Fresh water doesn't go well with fresh fillets. They'll go milky, and it spoils the fish very, very quick. If you had to do it, you possibly would do it with salt water, but you would avoid it with pretty much everything you possibly can not to be able to do it. It just ruins the flesh very, very quickly. We will try and use paper towels to pat it down, pick off any scales if they're on there, but just trying to keep that area as clean as possible. We have a large plastic board that we store in one of the lockers that we can pull it out, and it's specially designed for filleting fish on. And once you get the fillet off, you can turn it upside down, obviously skin down, and actually be able to carefully pull the fillets off the skin, and then be able to put it into a container just to keep it off the deck, and keep it as clean as possible. Try not to get any water on the fillets. I think that's a really good way of spoiling the fish. But you on a sailboat, we're wanting that fish to last probably a little bit longer than it would if you were in a normal circumstances in a house, or you're living on land. So we want that fish to last as long as possible. So you want to be able to cut out the bloodline straight away. Like once you've taken the fillets off, put it in a container, maybe take it into the galley, and then work on each individual fillet and take out the bloodline. Obviously, if there's any bones in there, and just trim it all up. If that bloodline, which is the darker meat, I don't know if we can see it in there. If you're looking deep in there, you'll see it when you take a fillet off. It usually runs up where the bones are. That area spoils like 3 times quicker than a normal piece of flesh. So you want to take that out. It doesn't eat well. It doesn't cook well. So cut it out straight away. And then just take the time to trim up those fillets and get them as clean as possible, and prep them for either freezing or cooking. One trick that we've learned over the years, we learned this in Hawaii where they're catching a lot of yellowfin tuna, is to wrap the fillet, each individual fillet, in a paper towel. It's actually it's a game changer as far as we're concerned when we learned all about it, because what it does is it enables you to store that fillet in the fridge for a lot longer. What it does is that fillet, that paper towel, you could change it every day or even every half day, whatever you want. But every time you put a paper towel around the fish, it whips away the surface moisture that's coming out of the fish. And that moisture is normally what will spoil quickest. And that's why most fish will get that fishy smell. So if you wrap it in a paper towel, it takes that away. You can keep changing it every day, every half a day. And the fish will last 2 or 3 times longer in the fridge. I think it's a really good tip. But also my wife, when she's vac bagging a lot of the fish, she'll wrap that fillet in the paper towel and then put it in the vac bag. So when you're vac bagging it, what it's doing is it's stopping the moisture drawing off the fish and going into the vac bagging machine, and sometimes it ruins the seal, or you're just getting fish juice all through your vac bagging machine. But the other benefit of that is when you thaw that fish out again, when it's been frozen, when it's thawing out, all that moisture is absorbed into the paper towel. It's not like a stew of that fish fillet is not sitting in a stew of juice and it's spoiling inside the vac bag once you've thawed it out. So you can take it out of the vac bag, peel the paper towel off, and it will actually look like the day that you've caught it. It looks, and it does have no smell to it. So it's a great tip, and it's something that we've used for many years now, and our fish taste a lot better, lasts a lot longer. And it's, we want to show respect to what we're catching and killing. So I think that's a good tip. If you don't have a vac bag machine, Ziploc bags are great. You can have a bucket of water, put the fish fillet into the Ziploc. Don't do it up. Drop it into the water. All the air gets pushed out. Then you can Ziploc it up, and it works just the same as a vac bagging machine. So that's a good little tip if you don't have that. So I feel like I've rushed through this. I don't know. We've been talking for long enough, I think. But yeah, that's the end of it. If anyone's got any questions, love to hear about it. But yeah, if you're fishing, just be safe, enjoy it. And obviously there's a few dishes my wife's done there. It's a very tasty and enjoyable way of putting a bit of food on the table while you're doing a passage or when you get to your destination. Thank you.
You're making me hungry with these slides, Tony.
I'm feeling hungry looking at it myself.
Even though you fish every day, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. We got quite a bit of questions coming in, Tony. Well done, and I think I appreciate the way that you matched your experience from being a sport fisherman to actually fishing from a sailboat, which is probably quite different between the professional fishers and the amateurs, but also how you explained being respectful for what you catch and what you kill and what you eat. We have lots of questions. We have, let's start with some of the questions, and it will jump from left and right, Tony. Sorry for this, but these are the questions that we assembled from before, and then I'll transition to the questions that we have from the chat channel. Even if we don't have a line out, many of us will catch fish. We will catch flying fish on deck, probably every night as we're sailing across the ocean. Are they eatable?
Yeah, they are. To be fair, I don't think I've ever eaten one, but they are. I've obviously used them as bait, and when I'm cutting them up, the flesh is great. They would be a very good eating fish. Obviously, you just got to take the guts out of them, scale them, and maybe cut the pec fins off them, and you can just roll them in flour and fry them. That'd be great. Yeah, we do that with a lot of small bait fish. Certainly, yeah, wouldn't turn my nose up at eating a flying fish. It'd be great.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't. I don't know if I'd eat one that had been on the deck all night.
Yeah. That's a good thing. Talking about safety when eating fish. Normally during the night we try to avoid being on deck and doing a tour looking for flying fish. So very often we only discover the flying fish in the morning when they're already stiff.
Yeah. But they do hit the deck quite often. I mean, my daughter we're out the other day, and one actually landed right beside her, and she's got it. We've got it in the freezer now. We're going to use it for a skipping bait for a billfish. So it happens. Yeah.
I'm actually reputed for every passage that I do that I get hit in the face by a flying fish at night. Yeah. So in the morning when we do the tour of the boat and we find some stiff flying fish, throw it over, no?
Yeah, I would, or you can keep it for bait if you want it. If that's, I think I showed earlier on a little pink lure with a bullet head. We actually put like flying fish or ballyhoo inside those lures and use them and they as a skipping bait. So it's the imagination as far as you can take it is what you want to do with it. But yeah, they can be used for bait, skipping lures, or if it's fresh, eat it or throw it overboard.
Yeah, very good. And fried flying fish is actually the national dish of Barbados, in anticipation of people arriving in Barbados after the transatlantic.
There you go.
A question about sargassum. Floating seaweed. As we cross the Atlantic, maybe a little bit less when we go from the Canaries down to Cape Verde, but certainly between our golden spot between 14 degrees north and 10 degrees north, as we cross the Atlantic, we'll go through either strings of sargassum or we go to football fields sized sargassum, which can be quite thick. We can actually, at times, it can be so thick that we feel the boat slowing down. But this is an absolute nightmare when you want to fish, when you have sargassum around the boat. Is there any way to deal with that?
Short answer is no. It can be a blessing or a curse. A lot of mahi-mahi will hang out around those areas. They love to. A lot of bait fish will accumulate under them, so they can be a great fish attractor. If you control down the sides of them, or near them, you can got a good opportunity of catching fish. But then you've also got a great opportunity of getting weed on your lure, which needs to be then pulled in and taken off. And some days it just gets too frustrating if it's too much, and you just pull the lures, and it's
exactly. Because sargassum is almost like a microcosm by itself, no? Because we pulled in sargassum from the lure, and we could find little shrimp in there, little crabs in the middle of the bloody ocean, shrimps and
it's a whole ecosystem in itself.
Yeah.
So
But
it's a good fish attractor.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is that it catches your lure, and then it's like fish on, fish on. We hear the rod going off, and it's just another bit of sargassum. And actually, with even a small hook, we hook up a lot of sargassum. No, it's like I wouldn't say half a kilo, but probably like a few hundred grams of sargassum that we can hook with a single lure.
Yep. And in that situation, like a hand line's a good option for that, because you might be fishing for mahi-mahi, which is going to be a good option for a hand line, and then it's a lot easier to pull the hand line in and get the weed off, as opposed to a reel that you might have a lot of it hooked onto it and it's dragging off, it's peeling off line, and you end up losing a lot of line. So hand line might be a good option through that area.
Yeah, exactly. The last thing that we want, even with the crew being tired, is to have 1,000 meters of reel going off, and the only thing that we catch is 100 grams of sargassum.
Yep.
Cool. You catch this before, but maybe it would be good to reiterate this. How to spot fish at the sea. You mentioned if I see a log in the water or something, fish aggregates around this. Maybe it would be good to recap. You as a fisherman, when you sail and you see something in the water, you might change a couple of degrees of the sailing boat, going left or right to go closer to that area. Now that area, what would that be? So you mentioned see some debris. You mentioned tide lines, which is like strings of foam in the water, or that looks as foam. What else?
Yeah, so we're looking for tide lines. So you might have a calm patch and ripples, so we'll troll down the side of that, normally on the side that the ripples are on, because that's going to be the up current side of it. If we see any logs or weed or something floating in the ocean, that's something we'll definitely change course to. I would frustrate a lot of sailors, because I look at the charts, and if I can see a seamount or
Tony is heading for his seamount again.
I'll plan my passage around that. If it means I an extra couple of miles to change an angle and go along a 1,000-meter drop off for a half a day, I'll do that. If it's so those are big things. Birds are a really good option. If you see birds up in the sky circling, they're looking at something. There's bait below that, or a big fish that's, whales, dolphins, any of those mammals that are in, swimming or in an area, they're there for a reason, and there's obviously food for them. So if there's food for them, there's going to be food for pelagic stalefish as well. So anything that's in the water, like if you only see a couple of birds in a certain area, there's something been happening there. They need that more than us. That's their life, is finding it. So if we see them, then there's something obviously there. So
yeah, exactly. A movement in the water, probably a sign
movement in the water.
of big fish chasing.
Yep. You see dolphins going in sort of a more of a direction, and there's birds in front of them. There's going to be tuna in front of that, so try and get up in front of that or to the side of it. There's lots, anything you see, it potentially is something where bait could be sitting, that a pelagic fish might find a meal. So anything that looks different in the water, pretty much.
Yeah. Now we're jumping left and right a little bit. One of the challenges that we have when we do transatlantic, when we do ocean crossings, is we come across commercial fishing boats. Now, one of the arts, I think, for us as skippers navigating a boat is to know what we need to do to avoid the fishing boats or whatever they're dragging. Now, in a transatlantic, how are they fishing? Are these long lines? So should I go like a mile, 2 miles behind the boat, or a mile in front of the boat? Are they trolling? Do they use fishing nets in the middle of the Atlantic? What is your experience?
More than likely, they won't be trawling nets, dragging nets in the middle of the ocean. It's too deep. They could be purse-seiners. If it's a purse-seiner, you're going to see that it's going to be a large vessel, possibly a helicopter, a big tower, and a net that gets scooped around the fish and they lift it up. It's a pretty big operation. It's something you would definitely see in the day and at night time, because of the amount of activity going on there. Most of the time, you're going to have surface long lining or deeper down. And most of those lines, please don't quote me on this, I don't want someone to say, oh, I got caught up in the long line, but most of those long lines are weighted and they are down below the surface. All right. So I don't want to give people this information, but most of the time you could actually sail through between those long lines. Okay. When it gets closer to shore, then that might not be the case. They might have lines and floats running through on and nets, but generally out in the open ocean, those long lines will be down deeper. They have a float, a line that's weighted, and then the whole backbone, I guess they call it, is way down in the surface, way down under the surface. There's some countries that do it different. So, I know when we go up to Guatemala, when we leave here, they have them floating on the surface. So when we see it, we have to actually drop sail, slow the boat down, because it's so long. They could be 2 or 3 miles long, these long lines. So to try and find the end of it is like looking for a needle in a haystack. So most of the time you have to go through. You have to put people up on the bow with boat hooks, if you think it is surface, and scoop the line up, cut it, walk to the back of the boat and retie it up and let it go out the back of the boat. So
yeah. Something that has been occurring, something that we observed more and more in the past couple of years, is FATS, fishing aggregation devices. So we have FATS, and the last couple of years we saw FATS even with IS on it, and then we see a fishing boat. I think in the last 2 years, these were Japanese fishing boats. They would be trolling around the FATS, the fishing aggregation devices, right?
They won't be trawling around them. They'll be purse-seining around them, more than likely. They set a FAD, and that FAD could be out there for weeks on end. They have a locator beacon on it, GPS, so they know where it is. A lot of those FADs will actually have a sounder that can basically measure the volume of fish that's underneath that FAD, the more high-tech ones. And then once that starts getting loaded up to where they think it's the right amount, they'll then come and put a net within a mile all the way around it and scoop up everything in the ocean. Without sounding bad, but the best thing if you could do is find one of those fads is kill it, damage it, because it's killing our ocean. But
yeah.
they are also, if you do see one and you don't want to do that, but they're a great area to sail past, troll past. There will be fish. Hopefully there'll be fish there, depending on how long it's been in there for. But there's no one, they might set long lines around it, but highly likely those fads will be there to be purseaned.
Yeah. And for those who wouldn't know, a purseaning is where the boat itself has a looped net that is stretched out to catch whatever is within that loop, right?
Yes, correct. They normally drop a small boat out the back and then drive the net right around where the school of fish is, and then basically, like it's a purse string, they pull a rope and it tightens it up, and then everything that's in that net is taken and killed. It's a very indestructible whaler. Yeah.
All right. Talking about safety and health, Sagittaria, fish poisoning. Is this something that we should be worried about when we are fishing in the ocean?
It's not something you need to worry about in the open ocean. If you're catching tuna, mahi, wahoo, billfish, it's something that's probably more relevant when you get to your destination and you're fishing around the rocks and all that sort of stuff, or close to the shore.
And reefs, coral.
And reef fish, coral areas. It is like the Bahamas is, there's ciguatera and a lot of fish species there. You need to do your research. You need to go and look at each, like, for example, the fish that we were catching in the Bahamas, you would not eat them, but when you get down to the sandblast in Panama, perfectly fine to eat. So I'd err on the side of caution of that. It can be a very life-changing issue if you get it. So the other thing is, on the open ocean, you need to be more worried about mercury. That is a real thing, and it's like your mackerels or eating a large amounts of tuna days on end, you can build up your mercury in your body, and it can be quite dangerous. So
and there was a follow-up question also on other diseases to watch for when fishing in the ocean, like worms in tuna or generally in fish. Should I throw away the fish?
Yeah, I know that's a hard one to see. I mean, if it's full of worms, then you don't want to eat it. If it's got one worm and a whole fish, then that's probably acceptable. You just got to cut around it. I without seeing it, you'd have to make that decision yourself. But most species like your mahis, your wahoo, tuna, they're not really going to have worms in them. So if in doubt, cook it.
Yeah. But in the preparation, I shouldn't go minuscule, trying to get all of the worms out, or how should I prepare the fish?
If you're having to go through it and pull all the worms out, you wouldn't eat it.
Yeah, exactly. Let me have a look. Once we caught a fish, how long would a fish typically last in a fridge? Or some of us don't even have fridges, but they would rather have a cooling box. How long typically can we keep, if we prepare it, like you said, with a paper towel around it, in a Ziploc bag or a vacuum bag? How long can we keep fish in a cooling space or a fridge? Not a freezer, but a cooling space or a fridge. And what are the typical ways to spot when fish is starting to get off?
I think in a fridge that's down around 3 or 4 degrees, I think that's a good temperature. You could refrigerate like yellowfin tuna. If it's wrapped up in a paper towel, you could get 4 or 5 days out of it. As long as you keep changing the paper towel, trying to keep that moisture off it. So that's a really good thing to do, to be able to keep whipping away that moisture off the fish, which will spoil first. If it smells really fishy, don't eat it. If a fresh fish doesn't actually have much of a smell. So
Yeah. That's
you
one of
know,
the lessons that my mom taught me. You know, I was raised by the sea in Austin in Belgium, and fish, of course, was a big thing for us. So my mom says, if it smells like a fish, you don't eat it.
yeah, that's right. If you've got a whole fish and the eye, it's been out in the sun and the skin starts getting leathery and the eyes are starting to go milky, it's spoiled. If you look at this is a good example. You see on this dish here that my wife's prepared. That's actually got lemon juice on it, so you can see how it's actually cooking the fish.
Yeah,
If you wash a fish in fresh water, it does that instantly. It doesn't cook it, but it just starts breaking down the flesh. So
yeah.
if your fish is not looking all nice and shiny and translucent, it's starting to spoil. But does that make any sense? So if you start getting that milky,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, 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 exactly. And for me, it was something that I didn't know. You know, one of the takeaways that I have from this webinar is one of the many takeaways is you don't rinse fish, neither with salt water or with fresh
No,
water.
no,
I
and
didn't know that.
no, a lot of people don't know that. It's just you think, oh, keep it clean. It's better to be clean than, have a little bit of blood on it. You try and rub it off or cut it off. Yep,
Cut it off or with the paper towel, dip it off.
yep, yep.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Another question that we had on forehand was, can we troll fish at night? Do fish actually bite at night?
We never troll at night. Just it's a safety thing. It's
Yeah.
everyone's sleeping. It's just I mean no. To be fair, I don't think I've ever caught a billfish or a pelagic fish at night. I've never tried. It's more safety, so I don't do it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah. I would agree with you. Even if it's just on the safety part,
yeah.
and again, we're going to sail through large areas of sargassum. You're going to have your reel going off,
Oh yeah,
picking up sargassum. You don't want to
yep,
wake up a crew, you know, to take over the helm because you need to pull in a reel because it's
yeah,
full of
yeah,
sargassum. Yeah,
yep.
yeah. And there was another question on.
Sorry, just to go back to that, the fish, looking for after your fish. It's in one of our cupboards, but we have a container, a plastic container, and it has a little plastic grill that sits in the bottom of it. And that has been unreal for us because what happens is all those fillets will sit in there, but any moisture and juice goes to the bottom and it's not touching the fillet. I think that's probably one of the best investments you could have on a sailboat. And it not only just for fish, but for other types of meat as well. It keeps that moisture off the fish. So that may be something to look out for if
Yeah,
someone's doing.
because as you said, it is the blood and the moisture that will spoil the fish.
Yep, yep. Just
Yeah.
like that, mate. Yep.
Yeah, and we talked before on crew safety and crew health. The last thing that we want is to have the whole crew
Oh yeah,
with food poisoning or diarrhea just
yep,
because we serve them some spoiled fish. Cool.
yep.
We talked about fishing at night, but how about in generally in timing? One of the people in our group said, in the Mediterranean, I caught all of my big tunas in the morning when the first tide comes out,
Yep.
while sailing 8, 9 knots. Is there a specific timing? Is the morning better? Is the evening better? High noon?
No, I am a big strong believer that the first thing in the morning is those first 2 or 3 hours is the golden time to fishing. So if you've got a watch schedule, make sure you got your fishermen on that first sun up shift
Yeah,
because it's a good time to catch tuna, especially big eye, bluefin, yellowfin tuna. They'll come up and feed. For example, in New Zealand, if you're targeting bluefin tuna, it's either last thing in the day or that first light in the morning is when everyone's out targeting them. Commercial fishermen are targeting that. And then they just go off the bite. They go down. They sit under the thermocline, which is the temperature change in the water. You won't get the bite all day long. So yeah, that's a good time to be fishing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We're switching to something else, and you mentioned this before. It might be good to recap the most humane way to kill a fish.
Yeah, yeah. It's like any animal. I mean, you got to obviously show respect to it and kill it as quick as you can, and look after the meat. You've taken a life, so you got to look after it, haven't you? So it's bleeding it is critical. If you can club it and bleed it pretty much one after the other, the heart's still pumping, pumping the blood out, and put it in. It's near water, so it's flushing water over it so the blood doesn't clot. It keeps pumping the water out. I think that's critical. And clubbing a fish it'll stun it pretty much almost kill it, and then bleeding it will finish it off, and will be done in seconds, and it's to get the blood out at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
One thing we didn't talk about, if you are holding a fish, and this is something, you know, they bounce around a lot. If you can push the head of a fish into a corner and put a bend in the body of the fish, it's 99% sure it will not be able to, it will not move. So if you're, you know, struggling with the fish, do that, and then you can put a knife into its gills and do what you, but if you put a bend in the body of the fish and hold it there, it won't bounce around as well. So that's
Sorry, Tony, what is a bean?
If you know, like a fish is bouncing around on the deck and, you know, potentially breaking stuff or bruising itself. If you can put a bend in the body of the fish, by holding the tail and put the head into the corner of the deck, it'll stop it bouncing around, and then that'll enable you to be able to dispatch it quickly. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Very good. I'm switching over to the chat channel. Man, we have a lot of questions here. Let me go and scroll back. A question, quick one. Does marlin have? Can marlin have ciguatera?
No, not that I know of. No, no. It'll have higher mercury levels than like a mahi-mahi or a wahoo.
Yeah.
But that's won't have ciguatera. Shouldn't have ciguatera.
Yeah. There was one question from Axel and Mandy. What is a drag system? But I think this was at the very beginning. You talked about a drag system, but then you explained it later on. So that it is on the rod, and it's the system to vary the drag on the friction on the rod itself, right?
Correct.
Not the rod, sorry, the reel.
The reel, yeah. So I mean, like, visualize a set of disc brakes. It's putting pressure on and slowing that spool down, and getting it so it's calculated to match the line weight. So if you set it on strike, you want about 1/3 of the line, you know, the braking strain of the line. So it's just being able to accurately control the drag pressure.
Okay. Okay, very good. From Kay, what about the fluorocarbon line? I think you talked about fluorocarbon leaders, but what is there an advantage in using a full fluorocarbon line?
No, it's hellishly expensive, and it's very it's stiff, so it wouldn't spool onto the reel very well. Some tuna fishermen might put 5 or 10 meters onto their spool, but you wouldn't spool a reel with it. It would cost, you'd need to take a second mortgage out for it.
Yeah, yeah. And this brings me to something that also came up in the questions. You talked about the leader line. I mean, we're going back to the very basics probably of fishing. You talked about a leader line.
Yeah.
Can you elaborate a little bit what is the leader line and why do we need the leader line? So going from the reel or your hand line, you have your nylon, your normal fishing line going out, and then the last couple of meters from the line is a leader line. What is a leader line? Why do we need it?
Okay, so the leader line is thicker than your main line, we'll call it. You know, your 80-pound monofilament or your mono fishing line. Leader is heavier because you need abrasion resistance near the lure because the fish can hit it. You need it to be heavier because you need to be able to pull that fish to the boat once it gets closer. But yeah, so it's basically so you can handle the fish, and so the fish won't break the line. You know, if you tied your fishing line straight to a lure and 80-pound, it could just get broken on the bite with the you know, a violent bite or the teeth, or so it's just trying to, yeah. But and if you go too heavy, then you ruin the action of the lure. So it's a fine line to get it right.
Yeah, and you gave some specifications in your presentation. That's great.
Yeah, 200 to 300 pound is good size. 300 pounds perfect for most lures. So yeah.
Okay, cool. From Monica in Vivere, we're going back again to food safety. Apart from worms, we talked about worms before, but you can visually see. Is there any other parasites that we should be worried about? And if so, what do they look like? How can you spot them?
No, the only other thing that you might see on a fish is sometimes you might get calcium growths on the bones. You know, they might be damaged. sometimes you might have an air pocket in the and I'm not a doctor, but like some sort of something's damaged the fish and it might have a little air pocket in the flesh, or it could have been hit by another fish, or have some scarring. You just, when you're doing that preparation after you've taken the fillets on, it's all about just trying to cut any areas off and having it nice and clean. You just want nice clean fillets. So if there's any damage to the fish or it's been injured before, just cutting those areas away. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Another question from Kay. The line strength versus targeted fish weight.
Yep, that's a good question. Line strength. So we said before 80-pound is, or 37-kilo line is just a good general weight that's going to cover you from a small tuna up to a blue marlin if you hook one. So yeah, and then you just need a reel that's going to be able to handle that line weight and have 7 to 1,000 meters of line on it. So 80-pound is a good all-round line weight for just general trolling lures, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not just the weight of the fish, but it's also the drag that it has when you reel it in, no?
Yeah. So, like I say, 80-pound main line, or 37-kilo, you're going to be running about 12 kilos of drag. And, even a medium-sized mahi will still peel that line off a little bit, but it'll eventually wear it out. So that's why we have that sort of heavier line.
Yeah. A question from Alexander, and probably lots of other people would be interested on this, Tony. If you could do me a favor, and once you have time, because I know you're waiting to lift anchor and move to the next country, but once you have time, could you do me an export of the presentation into a PDF and send it to me so I can share it with the group?
100%. I'll do that late in about 3 hours once we get on the side.
Once you get to the other side. Yeah. There's no hurry. There's no hurry. Okay, let me see. Another question from Carlin. What if you use fresh water to clean the tuna before vacuum? What if you have used fresh water to clean the tuna before you vacuumed? Throw it away. So I think Carlin probably has a fish that she has previously rinsed with fresh water. Does she have to throw it away?
No, she doesn't have to throw it away. It's just not going to be as good a quality as it could have been, So
exactly. So we're not going to go join Carlin for dinner eating fish on her boat then.
we'll better see fresh water. No, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It just, it's just little tips to keep everything in the best possible condition. But if you've had to wash it in fresh water, it's for a reason. You're trying to clean it. It's, it's done. It'll be all right.
Yeah. Very good.
And if you've backbagged it, it's not going to get freezer burned as much as it would have if it's just sitting in a bag with air in it as well. So
yeah. A practical question from Sensor, and I see where he's coming from. Probably for you as a sport fishing man, the glory is to catch a big marlin or a big yellowfin tuna. But probably for us as sailors, it's like, oh my God, this is a real big one. So is there a practical way to avoid bigger fish by type or size of lure?
Yes, there is. I mean, running smaller lures is a good option. So don't run massive big marlin lures out the back, because eventually one day a big blue marlin will hit it. But on saying that, elephants eat peanuts, eh? So and we've caught some of our biggest marlin on very small lures. So it does happen, but running smaller lures is probably going to be a better option, I think, on a sailing boat.
Yeah. And type of lure, is there, because you were talking about surface lures, sinking lures, when we want to target, typical fish that we would want to have is a small mackerel or a small mahi-mahi.
Yeah, so I guess for that, like if you had to pick 3 lures, you definitely have a cedar plug. It's a small lure. It's very tempted for wahoo and tuna, mahi. A deep diving lure, like that Rapala style lure, you'll be very, I don't think you'd catch a billfish on one of those. So that's suited to the target species, mackerel, right through to your mahi and tunas and wahoos. And then if you were going to get some surface lures, like little jet heads or little bullet head type sort of style lures, they might be, 200 millimeters long, or 20 centimeters long, would be, you've got less chance of catching a big billfish with that, and more chance of catching your more, your small table fish.
Yeah. Another question from Sensor is another really practical question. Once we caught the fish on the hook, um, what would be the amount of line that we let out? And I assume on hand line you don't let the line out, but I assume on the reel the line goes out. Is there an optimal distance that we let the line out to be able for the fish to stop fighting before we start pulling the line back in and start pulling the fish towards the boat?
Well, I mean, it's as soon as you can get the boat manageable, that's more the answer there. As soon as you can get the boat in a position that it's not moving, or it's moving in the right direction, I mean, like, we've caught blue marlin in literally a minute, because we've been able to back up on it and quick grab the leader and get it beside the boat and subdue it. And that's on a sports fishing boat. But no, as quick as you possibly can, as quick as you
Yeah.
can. So
Yeah.
if you can wind that fish to the boat straight away, then do it. It's there's
Yeah.
the drag's there if the fish is peeling off, and it's giving you an opportunity to get the boat, and the line capacity is giving you an opportunity to get the boat in order, so you can then get the fish to the boat.
Yeah. So knowing that we're sailing on a passage, probably there is not much of a chance that we get all the crew on board and start taking sails down, and we just keep on cruising in the same direction, the same speed. There is no advantage of trying to leave as much line out as possible before we start reeling it in. That doesn't do much in terms of the
No,
fish resistance.
that'll make the situation worse, because the more line you get out, the more drag pressure you get on the line. So you're going to just lose line faster and faster and faster and faster until it breaks, or you get spooled. So the less line you have out, the better.
Okay, cool, excellent. Another question from Sensor is something also that I was thinking about, and it's an interesting one. Is there a possibility that we catch a dolphin by accident? I mean, all of us, love dolphins.
Yeah.
How come do dolphins bite on lures?
No, they can.
And why is that?
I think it's got to do with the metal on the hooks. They can actually pick up on that. There must be something that they can pick up on, whether it's a magnetic thing or something. You will not get a dolphin. In all my years, I've hooked 2 dolphin in 25 years, maybe 30 years, and they were not hooked in the mouth. They were when we were in a big feeding frenzy and a dolphin swam through, and the line come through on the dorsal fin and got stuck in it.
Yeah.
So they will not take, and even if you've got a live bait out, you're live baiting, and it's got a hook in it, a dolphin will not eat it. And I can back this up with like facts, is that we're in Mexico, for example, if we're live baiting, or Panama, a big dolphin will come up and grab, if the hook's at the front of the lure, the front of the live bait, they'll come up and grab it and wait for you to put pressure on, thinking you've got a fish on. They'll twist it and pull the body off the fish. They will never, ever, ever get hooked. And the way that we go about getting, so we don't have dolphin taking our fish, we put a little treble hook, and it's not hooked to anything, and we just stick it in the tail of the fish, and the dolphin will never go near it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You were talking about the mercury, especially I think it was on mackerel and maybe also a bit on tuna. Is there a way that we can find out whether fish contains mercury, or are there mercury levels? Like a fish is more mercury than
Yeah. Like there's a lot of information online about that. We know for a fact that mackerel have got it. We know that your bluefin tuna are higher than a yellowfin tuna, and then your skipjack tuna will be less than so the bigger they are, the more chance, the higher the mercury levels. Swordfish is very, very high in mercury as well. So, but blue marlin, blue marlin, white marlin are not as high as a swordfish, so to speak. So and a bluefin tuna. So
Yeah. So
online
it's more per species. It is not that, okay, I catch a mackerel and can I measure how much mercury there in there?
no,
It's
you
just
can't measure it.
general.
No, it's just you're just running the, it's yeah. All of those species you can eat, but you just
Yeah,
got
yeah,
to
yeah.
eat them.
Yeah, yeah. You wouldn't eat mackerel for 2 weeks in a row.
No, 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 no.
Okay, very good. Another question, they keep on coming, from Sensor. Cleaning a fish, you talk about scaling. Why do we have to scale a fish? And secondly, do we skin it or not?
No, I only said scaling like if you got you a small fish like a flying fish, you might take the scales off it, because when you cook something so small, you don't want to fillet that. You want to eat it, the skin and the flesh, roll it in flour, deep fry it, great. With a tuna or a mahi-mahi, you're taking the fillets off, and then you're, if you've got a big long fillet, you run the knife down, take off the sections of meat off the skin. So you don't fillet those fish. I mean, no, you don't scale those fish. You're just
Yeah,
taking the fillet.
yeah. Okay. Once from Monica, once they caught the dorada, which had black spots on the flesh along the bloodlines. Any thought what that was?
Blood spots along the bloodline, that would be more, that sounds like it might be blood clots, little spots of blood through the bone line or the bloodline. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. From Helena, ideally, how far behind the boat should you aim to place your lure? You were talking about waves and probably, so I think I can guess one of the answers depending on the surface lures on the waves, etc. So maybe I'm becoming an expert here, Tony,
No,
but enlighten me. Tell me I'm
yeah,
all wrong.
when you look out the back of your boat, and it's not so visible on a sailing boat because we're obviously got our vessels designed so they slip through the water, but you see pressure waves at the back. So if you're running surface lures, you want them on the front of the surface waves. But like if I was running a teaser, it might be one boat length behind the back of the boat, and then my lure with a hook in it could be 1.5 boat lengths back. So we're talking 20, 25 meters back behind the boat. Yeah.
Only, oh yeah, 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 very good. Um,
And where it swims well as well, because if some lures need to be close to the boat, and they like a bit of angle and they can pop through the water. Some lures swim better out the back of the long way out the back of the boat. So you see the plugs and your bullet type lures, they can be 1.5, 2 boat lengths out the back. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Another question from Helena. When we use Rapala lures, they always seem to spin around and jump out of the water. Are we doing something wrong?
There's a few reasons for that. The boat's going too fast. So, if you're getting over 6.5, say over 7 knots, then yes, that's too fast for those sort of style lures. You might need to put the lure back more to get it diving down and keep it under the water. It could be if it's like being damaged and the bib's a little bit off skew, like that can be a problem. A lot of people attach the snap swivel to the top of the lure, and that doesn't make them swim that well. So you need to crimp your leader to the top of the lure and then have it, 3 or 4 meters from the lure where you actually attach the snap swivel. And that's probably the number one issue that most people have, is they just put a big snap swivel onto the top of the lure and it never swims that well. So
Yeah.
otherwise it's got the wrong size hooks on it. If the hooks are too big or too small, then that lure can't swim properly. So that's
Yeah,
the
yeah,
main.
yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, that was actually Steve's question. I'm on Elena's account, but
Okay, Steve.
the snap shackles on the lure, that's exactly what we do. So I'll
there you
try
go.
changing that round, eh?
Yeah, just try and crimp your fluorocarbon if you get some, or 200-pound leader to the lure, and then run it off and put a loop 3 or 4 meters up the line, and then crimp it onto it.
Yeah.
Make it happen. And if you don't, same thing if you run really heavy leader, it can affect the how it swims.
We've never been able to keep them in the water. No matter the distance behind the boat, they always just kind of get lots of pressure on the line, and then it snaps back and the thing comes popping up out of the water every time, eh?
Yep. I'll try that. You might be
We'll
sailing
give it
too
a
far.
go. We'll give it a go. Thank you.
That's all right.
Okay, let us know how it goes, Steve. From Robin and Rachel, what reel and rod combo could we use when we have 3 lures on the line to target manageable fish? Probably, I can guess the answer already, Tony. 3 lures, manageable fish on the rod, sorry, on the line.
So hang on, I don't understand the question. So they've got 1 rod and reel with 3 lures, or 3?
Yeah.
Um,
So they have like 3 smaller lures on one line.
Yep. So they obviously, if they're doing something like that, you might be targeting skipjack or bonito or smaller fish like that. So, what were they asking? What type of rod and reel?
Yes.
I think we said earlier on, that a 50 wide, which is a bigger game reel. Yeah. That would be more ideal.
Yeah, but you also said that you were not particularly a fan of having multiple lures on one line or multiple hooks on one lure, if I understand it well, right?
Yeah, I mean, so what are they were saying they had 3 lures on one line. Yeah, so I mean, we do
Peter,
that.
if I might just interject, I think that I don't know whether you can see me, but I think just reading that, I think they were referring to the 3 smaller lures that you were talking about, and therefore, if you've got a smaller lure, would you have therefore a smaller rod and a smaller reel?
That way.
No, I would still run the same rod and reel combo because, like I say, a big fish could still hit those small lures. So it's we just have a massive problem of trying to slow our boats down and lose a hell of a lot of line really quickly. So if possible, have a big rod and reel combo or have a hand line that you can pull the fish in. And if it's too big, it's just going to bend the hook.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks also for the intervention on this.
Thank you.
All righty. Listen, this was a long webinar. We have 2 hours on this. You need to lift anchor, Tony. You need to get going to the next country. Listen, thanks a lot for this. I see lots of cool comments on the chat channel. I think people really appreciate it. We'll stay in touch. And maybe on the next passage, I'll become an expert. I'll become the dedicated fisherman on the next passage or something.
You need to have a fishing competition for the passage,
Yeah, for the flotilla, we can do that. The biggest and the most tasty of all fish. I can already imagine all of the pictures coming in of people with this big AI generated fish pictures.
Yeah.
All right.
Look, I'm not trying to promote myself here or anything, but we do have a YouTube channel, and if you are interested in finding out like some of these different knots and rigs and all that, there's a whole lot of tutorial stuff in there that you can look at that may help.
And I have the addresses to the group on the chat channel. I'll send the links. I already sent the link to the Instagram channel, but I sent the link also to the YouTube channel.
Yeah. It's just there to help people. So that's what it's there for. So
cool, Tony. Thanks again, Tony. Thanks again for all the efforts you put in there to put the slideshows in there to prepare for this. And I hope you have a good passage to the next destination. We'll stay in touch. Thanks again, Tony.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Cheers, everybody. Thanks. Good night. Bye-bye. I'll switch the recording off.